Hello and welcome to Kain and Company. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming Nicole Gignac from L2T Media, who is the Vice President of Sales. And Nicole is actually going to answer some questions about keywords, mobile marketing, and search in general, and how it's impacting dealerships. So let's get right to it. Well, welcome to the show, Nicole. I'm so pleased to have you on here. And Nicole is the Vice President of Sales for L2T Media. And I'm sure this, just to start with, how long did it take you before you could perfect saying L2T Media?
You know, it's something that even some of our most tenured customers, unfortunately, still cannot say. I've got it down. I better by now, but unfortunately, it's a tongue twister.
Well, and then you've got the double whammy. Your last name is Gignac, and you had to tell me you pronounce it like cognac. So I've had to hold that in my mind every time I reach out to you.
Oh yeah, it's a tongue twister as well. I don't think most people even worry about remembering that one. So my husband told me when we got married that I had to learn to accept that nobody will ever get your last name right again. So.
I can appreciate that. Well, thanks again for joining me, Nicole. Could you tell us a little bit about L2T and your role there?
Yeah, that sure sounds great, David. So I've been with the L2T Media is a digital marketing agency. We specialize in working with automotive dealerships. That's 99% of our clientele. We've been in business for almost it's crazy. It'll be our 10-year anniversary in 2017. So it's exciting. And unbelievable at the same time that it's been that long. So in the digital age, that's an eternity. And then I've been with the organization for about 8 years, and been worked with the sales side of the division that entire time. And I oversee our outside sales team as well as our entire support team at the office.
Wow, that's great. Well, the good news is, being in automotive digital, everything's always the same, so there's never any changes in the industry, no new advances or technology. So selling to dealers must just be like dusting off the old sales tactics and presenting once again, right?
I would say this is the most interesting job I've ever had in my entire career. No day is ever the same, and once we think we figured something out, it changes. So, that's what's fun about it, though. That's what I love about the job, is that it is never change. There's never a day that is similar to another, and that every day you're learning something new in the digital arena, which I'm sure is what you love about it too.
It is. It's fun, and I think what's cool is, whenever I've reached out to you all for assistance, and some of the times, just a few weeks ago, I was going to do a presentation with my daughter for Lexus, and I was like, oh, I've got to have some updated information. And you guys really have to stay on top of it, both to educate, but also just to run your primary business. Could you share with me a little bit, what are the common questions you guys are getting from dealers when they reach out to you? What problems do you solve, so to speak?
That's a great question. It seems as though as of late, there's no lack of information in the dealer world. So they all have so much information, yes, unfortunately, being disseminated to them. So it seems as the question that's come up as of late, because as you know, it changes constantly, is what do I do with all of this stuff? Because there's so many mediums to try and tackle, and there's so many things to try and be good at. And while trying, it's almost impossible for a dealership to do all that. So it seems as though as of late, our real challenge is trying to simplify it all for the dealership. Yeah. And focus on the things that will make the most impact, because you can't tackle it all with new social mediums coming up every day and figuring out which one's going to be the hottest one. And we try and simplify and focus on the giants, and know that dealers have limited budget and limited resources. So how can we help them simplify it?
Well, it's interesting. You all have done a really good job of positioning yourself both as an independent provider to dealers, but also wedging yourself in being a certified provider for some of the OEMs. So how has that relationship with OEMs helped you all to better understand the needs of the dealers and balancing the needs of the OEM?
Yeah, it's definitely been great. We really like having both perspectives, I think, in working with the individual dealerships outside OEM programs as well as having those OEM programs. Definitely we've seen, examples of OEMs like Chrysler, for instance, does a really great job of with their program of holding the vendors accountable. And because of the massive amounts of data that they get on what we do, they're able to provide a different level of insights, that help us as providers make sure that we're helping the dealer. For instance, as of late, the question I think has been in our reviews with Chrysler is CPL, cost per lead, is that the most important metric or not? So it's really been interesting, and Chrysler has the level of data with, partnering with Shift, that they have just all that data that tells, is this or is this not the metric? And really that's what I think is neat about those OEM partnerships, especially the Chrysler relationship that we've have. And it really allows us to see things from a broader perspective. And then I think the focus with the individual dealerships allows us to make sure that we never lose sight of, those individual challenges that each dealer has outside of what the OEM's telling them to do. So we try and, maintain that balance really effectively.
Well, speaking of effective, what you've really done for a lot of our clients is help them navigate the search environment. What kind of journal advice do you want to give dealers when they're considering this? Because what we typically say is it's a doable task to do it yourself, but you really don't. You want to just sell cars and help your people improve on a daily basis and turn this over to the experts. And being that you guys are the experts in this field, what kind of advice do you give dealers when it comes to navigating search?
It's well, as far as doing it yourself versus outsourcing, I would say anymore, with the amount of vendors that are out there and the margin pressure that the vendors have seen because of the amount of vendors out there, it's probably a much better deal for a dealership to outsource than to try and do it themselves. Just because, we're the paid search product has definitely become more of unfortunately, a commodity in the market with a lot of vendors offering it. So, what we've been forced to do is obviously still provide a great product, but really watch our costs on the product and figure out how we can deliver it more efficiently for our dealers. So that's, a challenge that I think a lot of paid search vendors are going to continue to have because again, the amount of vendors and, Google, it really expanding their premier SMB program and making it bigger and making, allowing more people to get into it, I think just shows that there's just a huge amount of choice out there for the dealers. So I really think it's a no-brainer in terms of outsourcing, just because the choice and the price is really spot on. And then as far as navigating it, it seems as though, again, what we're challenged with right now is what do we, what's the primary metric? It seems as though, cost per lead on paid search and focusing on cost per lead has been the metric for a little while, and really it's the race towards the lowest cost per lead. But we're questioning that, and we're trying to see what else is out there and what else should we do to make sure we get the quality traffic that the dealer wants. And is that just necessarily cost per lead, or is, the consumer, because they're not, calling or submitting forms as often, how else do we tell whether or not that traffic is good quality traffic?
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, so please go ahead.
Yeah, so we're just exploring different things. Attribution is a big topic as of late. So how do we look at the searcher and figure out, whether they came from display or video and then came to the search and typed in your branded term, or if they came from a new car search query and then later on came in via branded term. What we're seeing is that because the consumer is doing so much research online, if you're not showing attribution, it's almost impossible to show the return effectively.
That's interesting. So. Yeah, so attribution obviously is a huge buzzword, and everybody is playing tug of war saying, we caused it, and we were the final push. So I can imagine that is a big challenge. I have an interesting dynamic that occurred to me just last week. I was doing a webinar with Montana dealers who are Ford dealers, and they were suggesting to me that their manufacturer was only going to make available for them to use outside vendors other than the ones that are currently on the ledge for search if they had a 30% impression share. And that was the first time I'd ever been exposed to that, and I thought, wow, you know, it goes to your point of the metric model is always moving and what's most important, and particularly when you look at something that perhaps could be a soft metric like impression share and pretty much easily manipulated, or you know, there's a lot of different variables there. So as dealers are considering that, I was kind of like, I've got to go consult with some experts and find out what to do on this. So I'll throw that over the fence, and if you care to comment on it, I'd love to hear it.
So impression share can be easily manipulated, which make it a very tough metric to measure against, unfortunately. So, you know, you can easily manipulate that just by drawing in a radius and, you know, doing too tight of a radius. So, unfortunately, holding to that benchmark can be tough because it causes just lots of room for manipulation, and unfortunately, that may not be in the best interest of the dealership. You know, if we're drawing, what we've found is sometimes if you draw on the radius too tight, you miss out on potential shoppers. So while your share of voice will go up in your, you know, really tight backyard, you miss out on some potential shoppers that probably would have come there if you're drawing it in too tight. What we've typically found is, you know, we'll analyze the pump in, pump out reports and work with the dealer to look at those and say, okay, based on this, you know, we should revise our radius, and we're constantly looking at that as a primary tool to drive efficient traffic.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're paying attention to all that kind of crazy stuff that goes on. So mobile has become the dominant shopping platform for a lot of people. Mobile search, is it much different than traditional desktop searching?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, it really is. We're finding that consumers are definitely, they're using the mobile voice feature a lot in search right now, and that's a big trend with the near me searches. I'm sure you've heard a lot about near me. And that's been going on for quite some time, but you know, there's impacts to a lot of things when it comes to voice search. There's impacts to organic and what types of keywords and how you include those keywords in the content, as well as impacts to paid search and your keyword strategy. So we've definitely revamped our keyword strategy, both for paid search as well as SEO, based on a lot of that voice search that's happening on mobile and the queries that are happening on mobile. And near me is just one great example that is really big right now that we've capitalized on for the past year and a half now with our dealers, is ever since we kind of saw it coming on. And what's great when you capitalize on stuff like that early is you get the low cost advantage on the paid search side. So that's been fun.
No question. So along the same lines, geofencing, geotargeting, what I've heard recently is some dealers are like, oh, that guy had a customer in my showroom and my competitor served up an ad right there at the time when I was trying to close them. And I was like, I don't know if dealers really can afford to get to that level of sophistication. So just if you could give us an overview of the geofencing strategies that you all are starting to research.
So we've done this for probably, I'm thinking now, it's been a while. It's been probably, I think we presented on some of our advanced display strategies at Digital Dealer maybe a year and a half ago. So we've been doing this for a while, and really the advanced, you know, geofencing or targeting around a specific competitor's location is really affordable, actually. You know, you could do it even as simply, it just depends on the level of sophistication you want to get to with geofencing. You know, there's all different levels of sophistication. Some are more expensive than others, but in a manner, you know, you could do it through a regular display network like Google's very easily, as well as Facebook's. So, we've definitely seen really great outcomes out of doing some geofencing as well as a lot of the Facebook display strategies. So it's a great, the customer, we know from Google's micro moments that the customer is looking, one of the moments that Google's preaching is, am I getting a good deal moment?
Yes.
And so that's that moment that they are in the showroom or they are near the showroom and they're wondering that. So dealers have to be cognizant of that and, making sure that number one, they're dealing with that in the showroom. I don't know that, from a process standpoint, if that training is being put in place, that, the consumer is doing that. And number two, of course, from an advertising perspective, you can tackle it as well as an opportunity to conquest. So it's exciting, but the one biggest thing that I think about is if the consumer is visiting 2 dealerships on average, and they're in the showroom asking that question, then you might have not done something right on the process side, because what you don't want is you don't want the consumer asking that question when they're in the showroom. You want them feeling that way when they're in the showroom. So I think process is, as I'm sure you agree with, is one of the biggest opportunities I see with all of these changes, because as we continue to fight over limited traffic, process becomes that much more important.
Absolutely. The process never seems to go away or fade in the need, for sure. We always say 100% of your opportunities are going to come from your marketing, but 100% of your results are going to come from your process. So it's a happy marriage and very beneficial to dealers. Well, Nicole, thank you so much for being so generous with your thoughts and opinions, and I look forward to having you back on a future show.
Thank you, David. Appreciate the time.
Well, I hope you learned as much as I did. It's always great to talk to professionals in the industry, and Nicole really is right up there with the best of them. Thank you very much for joining me this week, and I hope to see you next time here on Kain & Company.